I'm sorry. The person you called cannot be reached now.
This afternoon, I'm watching my 2-year-old niece, who says to me, "Pizza, pizza." The Alexa orders her a pizza. Next thing I know, I have a pizza showing up at my door. My niece is talking, and the government knows when I want a pizza.
What do we want to talk about?
I told you what we're going to talk about.
Rabbi Shlomo?
Okay. I want to welcome everybody to Claiming for Everyone. And one of the great things about this show is that Larry Klayman, other than being a righteous fellow and the greatest one, is also a lawyer that studied all forms of law. And right now in the news, in current events, we're dealing with some serious law issues. One of the things that's going on this week has been Congress's decision to limit the president's power, to basically, castrate the president and his abilities to act swiftly and quickly. What is, as a lawyer, what is the correct thing?
Well, the correct thing is the president has the power, the executive power, to take action to protect the interests of the United States. Now, if it gets to a question of declaring war, then, of course, the Congress has to be involved. But it didn't get to that point with regard to Iran. And all of these individuals that are coming forward, mostly Democrats, people like Pelosi, but also Republicans like Senator Mike Lee and also Rand Paul, I mean, they just simply, have their shtick, so to speak, and they're wrong. They're wrong.
8 Democrats, by the way, actually switched sides today and voted against it. 3 Republicans switched sides and voted for it, but 8 Democrats actually.
The president has to have the ability to react quickly, and Congress does not react quickly. And frankly, Congress is a bunch of clowns. So whenever possible, keep Congress out of the act, in my opinion. And quite apart from the legal aspect.
And I think it's very important to state that you are not. You were against the Iraq War. You're against war. You're against intervention. That this isn't like you're saying this as a. You're not. I'm not sitting across from Lindsey Graham.
Well, let me tell you why I was against the Iraq War. We went against the wrong country.
Yes.
We should have dealt with Iran then. We wouldn't have the problem now. I wasn't necessarily against the Iraq War until I found out that I was lied to like everybody else with regard to weapons of mass destruction. By the way, I had a doctor in Washington, D.C., James Ramey, who actually had a complaint filed with the Board of Medical Examiners because one day, he told me this, he was examining one of the officials of the Bush-Cheney administration. He was doing a proctology exam.
Yes.
And the guy asked him, the patient, he says, "Why are you down there so long?" And he said, "I'm looking for weapons of mass destruction." He got a complaint filed against him. I mean, that's how ridiculous the whole thing became.
But and the reason I bring this up is this isn't a partisan thing for you. This is you're a Trump supporter. You're a Trump supporter, but you're not just blindly defending the president's willingness to.
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, I don't like war either. I mean, I'm a child of the Vietnam War. I almost went, but for the fact that Nixon ended the draft the year I was going to be drafted. But frankly, if it came to war with Iran at this time, I'm not in favor of killing civilians, but I am in favor of just decimating the regime and the military structure and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. I would frankly have liked to seen a war in that regard. I mean, because if we don't fight them now, like in Dr. Strangelove, when Slim Pickens rides the bomb den and says we might as well take care of the Ruskies now, it's going to be much worse later. I think we should seize the opportunity now and eliminate their nuclear capability at this time.
That's if they have nuclear capability. This is where you and I disagree a little bit with each other. I sort of look at Israel. I use Israel as the thermometer of the Middle East. And let's say the correct temperature for most humans, except for my girlfriend, is 98.6, right? If the second Iran goes to 101.7 or 102, 1984 will happen all over again, which was when Israel decided to go and destroy Iraq's nuclear capabilities. So that's why I'm a little more hesitant to think that Iran and believe Iran is as close to getting this nuke thing. Hey, Larry, you don't necessarily always you never believe the government, right?
No, I don't believe the government. But look, nuclear bombs were developed in the early 1940s.
Yeah.
You can find the elements of how to assemble an atomic bomb in public libraries.
Yes,
The Iranians are a lot of things, okay? I'm talking about the regime. There are good Iranians, too. Most of them live in Beverly Hills or in Washington, D.C. But they're not stupid people. I mean, they're very bright people.
100%.
Evil, but also very bright.
And they've lost a lot of nuclear scientists who have answered their cell phones incorrectly. You know, so I'm not as nervous about that, but I understand. I get it. And I'm one of those people after Iraq, I have a hard time believing in, you know, and I'm not the skeptic. You know, it's just when it comes to certain things. Secondly, I wanted to talk about is we're both massive First Amendment advocates. It's the most important thing. But we all grew up with the being taught in school you can't scream bomb at a movie theater, or it's a fire. You can't scream bomb at a movie theater. It's against the law. So with that being said, every time, you know, Donald Trump has been accused of screaming bomb pretty much by the Democrats for the better part of 3.5 years. Since he came down that escalator ride, he has been accused of committing a crime. I mean, he has been
every minute.
Every minute since he came down that escalator of every day. So today we have Pete Buttigieg, to quote the president, screaming on Twitter, basically accusing us of having a part in the plane that got taken down by Iran's. You see, this is my point. Iran shot down this plane, I believe accidentally. I don't believe they did it on purpose. It gains them nothing.
Actually, I believe they did it on purpose.
So
either way, they shot it down.
Either way, he blames us for that, right? That that to me is screaming bomb in a movie theater. Chris Matthews the other night having a reporter on from Iran without having not an ounce of evidence, screaming that 30 American soldiers were killed at 2 a.m, you know, or 9 p.m. here, or whatever time it was. That's akin to me of screaming bomb in a movie theater. The rhetoric that is going on cable news right now, Larry, there were titles. World War III is on the way.
Where does the title of my book come from? Horrors: Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. Horrors in Congress, horrors in the judiciary, horrors in the media, horrors in the executive branch. You know, that's what we're dealing with here.
So why can't you have a lawsuit right now? Why can't tomorrow morning, you who knows how to find why can't you sue Pete Buttigieg for?
It's called standing. It's one of the weaknesses in our legal system is that American citizens don't have the right to bring lawsuits unless they're personally affected. In fact, the only state, my home state, Florida, is very progressive, not in a leftist sense, but it gives, in many instances, voters and taxpayers the ability to bring cases. For instance, if you pass a tax law in Florida, the legislature, and a citizen doesn't like it, he can challenge that tax law whether he's affected by it or not. We need to expand the concept of standing in our legal system to allow citizens to bring lawsuits. And we also need better judges because, frankly, the hacks that we have, and particularly on the federal bench, scratch the backs of the elite establishment. And it's a subject that I've been writing about over and over again. Most recently, is that we're in a revolutionary state because there's no legal and peaceful means to bring about change in this country anymore.
And what the left is trying to do, which people don't realize, right? The Second Amendment, why the Second Amendment is so important, and it's sort of a fascinating thing to me, is that the left, and I'm not saying liberals, and I say the left, and sadly they've been co-opted, but, you know, I'm a fairly liberal person in many ways, and, you know, but as far as the left goes, they are, obviously trying to steal free speech from us. And they're following the doctrine of Venezuela, of Nazi Germany, of all of these different places that once you take the guns, then you could take the speech. And people don't realize that until 10 years later, and all of a sudden, you know, Venezuela, and you have Maduro, and
this goes back to the founding of our country. What did King George III do? He seized our firearms. He attempted to seize our firearms. He took our legal system, our criminal justice system, back to the court of St. James, took it away from us. Okay, he taxed us beyond belief. You know, the American Revolution was fought essentially not just over First Amendment rights, not just over what became Fourth Amendment rights on reasonable searches and seizures, but over property. They were capitalists.
Yeah.
The American colonies were supporting the entire British Empire. It was the richest part of that empire, and they were raping us and pillaging and drawing our wealth away from us. And therefore, that was the basis of the American Revolution. And it was natural law. Our founders said, we don't recognize the laws of King George III anymore. They're unjust laws. You find that in the Declaration of Independence. There's a higher law. There's the law of God. There's a law of divine providence. They even wanted to insert in the Declaration of Independence a prohibition against slavery, but the southern states wouldn't allow that at the time. But Jefferson and Adams and Franklin were against slavery, but they realized the time had not come to end it. So we are at the same point today, is that the legal system that we have has been perverted by the judges, by the lawyers, by the legislators, by the deep state, and we have to find our own natural law, which coincides, by the way, with the law if it had been enforced. Our system is the result of the Hebraic legal system, the Talmud, the Ten Commandments. And that's our lodestar anymore. But the crap that comes out of Congress, these laws, that's not the law of God. That's not the law of man. That's the law as they say it is.
Right. And I've so
And the concept of the president can't take action, they vote for that, the House resolution, it's meaningless. Throw it in the trash. It's not worth the paper it's written on.
pretty much everything they write down is you could do the same thing.
Yeah, what did the Old Testament say? An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth? And Jesus was no pushover either. He did a number on both the high priests and the Romans.
So pretty much you're saying there's nothing. So Pete Buttigieg could pretty much put out a tweet that could start a war. I mean, literally. And I'm not just saying that.
Pete Buttigieg is desperate. Okay, yeah. You know why he's desperate? He's an articulate guy. Okay, he's confused. He's mayor of Terre Haute, Indiana, which is a mess. Okay, and he's also gay, and he knows candidly that we're not ready to elect a gay president. We're not ready for a first man in the White House, and most people can't envision, him and his significant other sleeping in the Lincoln bedroom together. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is.
No.
Okay, so he's got to grasp at straws right now because he thinks he might actually win. And I'm not saying it's right to be prejudiced because someone's gay. I'm not a homophobe myself. Do what you want in your own house. But leave me alone. But he's not going to be elected. American people are not ready for that. So he's grasping at straws.
So, and that's a frightening thing because we have a lot of people right now, just to get noticed, are grasping at straws. Because the president sucks the oxygen out of all of them. He truly does. This is something I've written about is if I live across the street from one of the Scientology centers, and when I remember about 3.5 years ago, before the president became president, it was like almost about to be the downfall of Scientology. These were what the left was fighting. They were fighting, MGO, whatever the food stuff, and they were fighting Scientology. And all of a sudden, every crisis that happened pre-Trump no longer exists to the left. He's the only crisis that exists to them.
No, and they're dishonest, but I give them solace, and I give them credit because I'm the same way. The more people push at me, the more I push back.
And we're going to have to take a break for a couple minutes because your building that we can't share where it is under major construction. So
either that or someone's trying to burrow in, maybe like the Palestinians, and
they're digging tunnels.
Digging tunnels. Yeah. I think they may be coming after us
instead of accepting the money and the food.
Well, you know how I would end the whole Israel thing? Buy them a Cadillac, okay, and a condominium in Jordan, and tell them that's their homeland, okay? But I think they probably mostly would accept that.
Yeah, I find that hard. You want to do a Get Smart here? I find that hard to believe.
Would you believe?
Yeah, it was one of the greatest.
80% of the population in Jordan are Palestinians. It should be that should be the Palestinian state, not on the West Bank.
That's for another episode.
Okay.
Tonight, I really do just want to focus on, though, more than anything, because it's frustrating to the people. I think the biggest frustration that people have, to the regular people at home, to really the Trump base, who has no party really affiliation. If you went to a Trump rally and you said to most of those people, put an R in front of your name, put a D in front of your name, they'd probably just say, just put a T in front of my name. There is no more party of the Republic.
What does T stand for?
Trump.
Oh, okay.
It is the party of Trump. And what that
I
party...
thought you meant twit. No.
But what's sort of... And I've constantly said this to people, and what the left doesn't understand is that the reason Trump got elected is because people, to quote Dirty Dancing, don't put baby in a corner. And people were so sick and tired of not being heard.
And they were not just sick and tired of not being heard, and we've talked about this before. They're tired of being lied to.
Yeah.
And remember the book, I think it was by Christopher Hitchens, Nobody Left to Lie To, something to that effect. Or maybe it was Dave Shippers, the impeachment manager on Clinton. But we're sick of that. We wanted somebody to take the government apart. And frankly, Trump's the only one that was ever willing to do that.
And look and look at the price he's paying for it.
Yeah, of course, the deep state has tried to destroy him. He can't even have a telephone call without it being wiretapped or intercepted. It's an outrage. And we talked about this before, but the president's going along with this mass surveillance with Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which picks up every call overseas, regardless of where it's made, and continues with the USA Freedom Act, which incorporates the Patriot Act, the mass surveillance in this country. It's been used against him, and he's got bad advice from the people around him, which are the deep state, because it destroyed him. It may destroy him if he gets impeached and convicted with regard to his calls with the Ukraine president.
Secondly, I was actually thinking about this today. Is what's your opinion on Apple unlocking phones?
Well, I'm against it. I don't trust Apple. Where did the technology for the NSA come from? It came from these high-tech companies. Apple, Google, YouTube, Instagram, the whole lot of them have the same technology that the government has, where they can turn on your cell phones, they can turn on your smart TVs. Look at Alexa, whatever it's called, that's in your house.
No, but I'm referring to when we arrest somebody, like the San Diego shooter a couple years ago, or one of those things. We can't break into their phones, and Apple has said we will not allow you to break into the FBI to break into the phones.
Well, I think that's the right thing to do. If you want to break into the phone, you need to get a warrant from a reputable judge.
Right, but the problem is that judges aren't granting them the permission to do it.
Well, because Apple is so powerful that the judges bow down to Apple. I've got cases against Apple. I've got cases against Google, YouTube. A hack Republican judge that Trump appointed. He doesn't know who he appointed as judges.
Well, I mean, he's had
most of these judges, he has no clue who he appointed. Establishment Republicans gave him a name, rubber stamp. Okay, he goes around telling us how great his judges are. They're not great. I haven't found one yet that has the courage to do what needs to be done. I have an antitrust case. A Trump judge dismissed it. It's now up on appeal to the D.C. Circuit. It was complete BS, the reason that he dismissed it.
Well, if you don't mind, since you brought it up, what's the case?
The case is for restraint of trade, an attempt to monopolize with regard to the various social media companies in excluding conservative content from their websites and their internet sites. And it's a very strong case. And in fact, the D.C. Circuit, Google and the rest of them tried to have it dismissed in the initial stages on appeal. And the D.C. Circuit said, no, we want to hear this case. And we've got a number of interveners in this case, filing amicus briefs. It's going to be a landmark case, win or lose, because the D.C. Circuit's going to reach these issues.
And we're going to be right back after this break. And we'll be joined by Louis Fine, one of our finest contributors. You need to go down and get him.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say Farrakhan.
No, that's funny.
Okay.
Look at you tonight.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, welcome back to Claim for Everyone. We got our what's that word? You're the
resident sage.
No, how do you pronounce it? The ombudsman. I can never pronounce that.
I know
word.
what you mean.
Yeah, you're our.
It's like the newspaper policeman.
Yeah, you're an honest version of what Brian Stelter was meant to be.
But better looking, of course.
He's that CNN guy.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, the fat.
That's
But if
that
you
was
could,
his
if
job.
you could offer a more unflattering
No, you know,
he's
comparison,
not.
I would
But
appreciate
Lewis is
it.
not a fat blowhard.
no, and Lewis is honest.
Yeah.
And one of the things we were discussing, and just I actually want to get your opinion on this is we were discussing.
I said a flat blowhard.
We were discussing
speech.
getting back to the First Amendment. We were discussing, it's basically you're not allowed to scream fire in a movie theater, right? It's against the law, right? Since Trump walked down the escalator or came down the escalator, and he didn't walk down the escalator for the better part of the past 3.5 years. He's been screaming for the left. He's been screaming fire in a movie theater.
that he's been talking.
Yeah,
is sufficient to constitute a violation
right.
of the First Amendment.
And they've been going after him for crimes against everything for the better part of 3.5 years. So today, Pete Buttigieg, right? He comes out and says that we're at fault for the Iranian plane going down.
No, it was a Ukrainian plane being shot down
by
the Iranians.
By the Iranians. And
is it Iranians or Iranians? Or is it
Iranians.
potato or potato or tomato or tomato?
Whatever they dislike more. Whatever they dislike more. The not nice ones.
Okay.
Call them Arabs. Then.
The Arabs, right? And
Arabs.
And so my question is, at what point? And I asked Larry, and Larry basically said you can't sue him because why can't? And if Donald Trump had said that statement today, which is far worse than anything he said at Charlottesville, the left would literally be, screaming from the rooftops.
By the way,
tonight.
let me add this, and this is one of my criticisms of the legal defense of Trump. They never were proactive. They just took punches.
Yeah.
Okay.
He
The
took
president
punches.
himself could sue Congress over this issue. He'd go to court on this issue. But he doesn't want to because he has the authority. Why give it to a leftist jurist to make a bad decision to create precedent?
Enough from us. I want to hear from our
Yes,
handsome
our
ombudsman.
honorable sage.
As I said, I'm as close to a First Amendment absolutist as you can get. So, Buttigieg, however you pronounce it, I'm not a fan for many reasons, none of which have to do with his sexual orientation. I say that because I don't want to be attacked for being a so-called homophobe. Hardly support gay marriage, support gay rights, but he offered his opinion. Not a very good one. Not an insightful one, not a very helpful one, but it's easy to blame America. That's what's expected from people on the left, to criticize America, to say what's wrong with America. There are plenty of things wrong with America, but if you only focus on what's wrong with America, the portrait you offer to the world seems as if indeed we have a fascist president. We don't have a free independent Congress. We have a complacent or compliant Congress that does the bidding of a fascist president that somehow nonetheless is able to impeach him. But what a Democrat says that's critical or in opposition to the president, I don't care. It's an opinion.
But that's
it's an opinion.
but
It may not be an educated opinion.
But it rises to the level of being extremely dangerous when other countries are using our Congress, our house's demagoguery, their hate against us. It could cause major damage, and I'm not just talking about from the EU. I'm talking about from these psycho countries that are using this as
I think it depends on the circumstance. I think sometimes it sends the opposite message. You can look at, say, the nuclear freeze movement during Ronald Reagan's presidency, and perhaps there were people in the Politburo and the Kremlin and the Soviet Union who said, this guy means business because look at all the people in the streets, not just in Washington and New York, San Francisco, but in London as well, that Reagan and Thatcher are nonetheless committed to these principles, and they will deploy the Pershing missiles against our I believe it was the SS-20s, or SS-2 missiles, and they're unbowed. And the same with George W. Bush and Tony Blair. Again, you could say for ill in this case because of their support for the Iraq War and their insistence on going to war, but they did not have a change in policy because of protests in the streets, nor did President Nixon allow himself to be influenced by the protesters, and said as much. And today is his birthday, so I bring that up. It's very apropos, 107 years old. And he made that clear to
Have
the
you
press.
ever been, by the way, to the
Many
to
times.
the Nixon Library?
Many times.
If
Yeah.
anybody
I
hasn't,
would like
been
to go.
you're
You wanna go?
Yeah, I've been there many times.
really? I haven't been
And
there.
Pre and post renovation.
yeah,
I've been there.
I was there post renovation, and I got the tour. I got the behind the scenes tour because of,
Well,
and it is. You want to know what I loved about it more than anything, is it doesn't whitewash the history.
Well, that's because the National Archives now runs the library.
Yeah,
They did not when it first opened.
Yeah, and they did such a good job with it, and Nixon was Nixon was the true peacemaker. To quote somebody I know, he was the peacemaker, and it's an incredible library. You have to go. You should go. But one of the other things I was talking to Larry about was, and I want to know your opinion on this, is Apple's refusal to give the passcodes. When we find the phone,
Again, it depends on the circumstances, and I am not a fan of big corporations or big government, bigness in general. It's one of the few instances where we were talking about Mitt Romney last time. Well, this is one of the few instances where I agree with A. Romney, his father, George Romney, who tried to instill in his son, I don't know how well he did it. He had more than one son, but with Mitt Romney, this aversion to bigness. And I no more trust a corporation than I do the government, but I think Apple has made a very good decision. I don't have much regard for law enforcement or the FBI, and I think I prefer Apple erring on the side of caution and let the FBI take Apple to court.
See, this is what I want to hear. This is what I like, because when you
I said the same thing.
You said the same thing, but when he said it to me, and I've been saying this a lot because we've been hearing on the news for the last, it's just the top of the FBI that's the problem, right? And then I start thinking, through history of like what the FBI has done, having Whitey Bulger as an informant while he's murdering people.
We have the Attorney General of the United States, Robert Kennedy, having the FBI illegally wiretap Martin Luther King.
Right, and it's like they always say it's just the top ranks, and I'm like, well, the top ranks higher
Not just
than
wiretap. I mean, they have video of.
Right. Well, they also sent. They also sent the audio tapes to his wife and encouraged him to commit suicide.
Well, he did have relationships with about 90-some women, but it's not their business.
Which, in my opinion, is irrelevant.
Yeah, well,
he paid the ultimate price, and that's, by the way, I want to say that about the people who
that's
will
not
never,
their business.
right?
That's
Who will never concede anything good or cede any ground to the supporters of Martin Luther King.
What
Jr.
was their business, and I'm an admirer of Martin Luther King, what was the FBI's business was his connection to communists.
Right, and that, for the most part, I would say that hasn't been established, because in one or two instances prior to the march on Washington, D.C. for jobs, justice, and equality. I believe it's jobs, justice, and equality. You tell I'm not black.
You
I should
guys
know
are the
that.
college graduates,
But
not me. So don't.
Going to college doesn't mean anything. But
It don't matter if you're black or white.
but
Michael Jackson.
But King and Philip Randolph made a point of making sure that I think it was Bayard Rustin, who was a communist sympathizer at one point, but he was also gay. That he not speak at the march. So they were very much aware of their vulnerability to criticism and attacks, and there's a reason why they also chose someone like Rosa Parks to lead the Montgomery bus boycott, to be the symbol of that alongside Martin Luther King Jr., because there were other people that had refused to give up their seat on the bus, but she was a model in every sense of the word of what they wanted the movement to represent, as opposed to later on, say, someone like Stokely Carmichael, whom Martin Luther King Jr. was very clear in criticizing and ostracizing.
Or Colin Kaepernick.
Or Angela Davis. She wasn't really part of that, but you get my point.
Yeah, I get your point. And, so it's very scary, though, for people at home. And I go back to this. You have
Malcolm X.
Right.
You have real honest citizens at home. Real people.
Remember the show Real People? Sarah Purcell?
Mm-hmm.
The show Real People. Remember that show on NBC in the 70s?
No.
Late 70s, early 80s.
I don't remember.
Oh, that's
that
right. You
show.
didn't grow up with TV because of the...
The whole,
orthodoxy.
But no, I grew up with a TV. I had a TV. I just know I'm a little younger than you are. And by half a month.
Real People was around. It was a good show.
I don't remember the show, but there are honest citizens sitting at home that see all of this. they see this hypocrisy. I mean, the government no longer. That's the great thing about Trump is he's brought out this what we have. Whether you love it or hate it, because it's really uncomfortable.
He's cauterized
sometimes. And I'm not talking about him being uncomfortable. What he's brought out is uncomfortable. Today, that Congress had a vote over war actions after he killed a terrorist is uncomfortable that they had it. But this is what he's brought out. And you have people sitting at home watching this going, why in God's name do I pay taxes? Like, why should I pay,
Good point.
Well, that's what I say to people who say Donald Trump is not my president or George W. Bush is not, when Bush wasn't their president, I said, I have no problem with that. I said, I'll tell you what you should do. April 15th, don't pay taxes.
It raises a
Just
bigger,
tell them that you don't recognize Bush as the legitimate winner of the 2000 election.
raises a bigger issue as to whether our Republican form of government is working.
Yeah.
Okay. And look, the founding fathers were enlightened. They were brilliant men, but to give unbridled power to representatives to vote any which way they want for their own political purposes, to me, calls into question whether a Republican form of government is the correct form of government.
It used to be a lot worse. You had candidates who could keep their war chests that retired as multimillionaires.
That's frightening.
They can't do that anymore. But they were able to do that.
They do it. They just do it under the table. That's all.
But
There was some congressman, African American congressman, who was found with cash in his freezer.
A member from Louisiana.
Yeah, this wasn't that long ago, by the
Yeah.
way. This is like 10 years
But
ago.
there are also plenty
Yeah.
of Pauls, Dan Rostenkowski among them.
Yeah.
who went to jail for
It goes both
corruption.
sides. And sadly, the guy from Alaska, Ted Stevens, whose name was just destroyed, and who sadly died in a plane crash, was exonerated after all was said and done. And my thing is to people at home, it's like there really is a loneliness and an isolation, like I brought up. There's a loneliness and an isolation, and that feeling of isolation when you see people like James Comey and just everybody getting away with so much. And if any American citizen were to do those same things, they'd be in prison.
Well, if there's
Correct.
They would need to get somebody like Larry Klayman.
Right. You're talking about isolation. I want to get to that in a moment. I just want to say that one of my chief complaints with the right is that they are right in their criticism of so many agencies of government, that they are inefficient, they're too costly, they don't work well. But they make an excuse for law enforcement. Everybody in government is bad except our cops, except the FBI, except law enforcement. And the left will condemn anybody in government who pursues a career in law enforcement and tell you every other agency in government has a good purpose and is working well or can work better if we give it more money. Now, you were talking about isolation earlier. You ever get to that point where you're so isolated, maybe you haven't left your apartment in a while, and
all
then
the time.
Right. So you ever get to that point where the dog is talking to you and you hear the dog is giving you
Let
orders?
me tell you something.
Yes.
My dog is smarter than most millennials. In fact, she has a vocabulary bigger than most.
I'm trying to make
millennials.
a defense for David.
No, I'm
Perkins.
serious. She doesn't use the word like every. She doesn't use the word like every 3 words. Instead, she licks.
Right.
Okay, so I give my dog more credit than.
If we're
most-
going to blame someone, blame Sam.
Yeah, but let's who your mom.
Don't knock
Right,
dogs.
yeah,
Okay,
right.
they're the best creatures on
No,
earth.
he's
I'm
not,
not a cat
knocking
person.
dogs. He's not knocking dogs. You misread.
And don't knock up dogs.
You mishear sometimes, Louis.
You have to go. You have to go about 3 miles east to do that.
Meaning human dogs.
People feel alone. They do. People and in some bad ways, social media has given an outlet to some of the worst kinds of people. But on the other end, there's still people that are sitting at home feeling like, I don't have somebody. There aren't enough Larry Claymans for everybody. There aren't enough. How many people have lost businesses, have lost land, have lost stuff?
Yeah.
Because they don't know. There is nobody fighting for them.
Well, get back to Washington, D.C. and dogs. The expression, if you want a friend in Washington,
Harry
get a
Truman.
dog.
Oh yeah, Harry Truman.
Do tell.
That was he coined the phrase. He said it. It's his quote.
I wasn't paying attention. Repeat it, please.
That if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog.
Oh, and who is it that said, who is it that said you judge a country by how they treat their animals?
You're talking about are you talking about the?
I'm paraphrasing that quote.
No, it's I think it's the it may be the Tolstoy quote about you can judge. We're paraphrasing here the quality of a civilization based on how it treats its prisoners.
Okay, and listen, we have to run.
Or some other Russian novels.
We do have to run. I want to thank our great ombudsman, Louis Fine.
You said it right.
I hopefully.
You got the Hooked on Phonics works.
It actually does.
Yes.
And of course, the greatest.
People want to see what I'm doing, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
And and also you could find us on Twitter at LK for everyone. Did I get it right? LK for everyone.
LK for everyone.
LK for everyone on Twitter, Facebook, same thing. Instagram, the same thing. LK, the number 4, everyone. And I just want to remind people: argue if you want to, read because you need to. But always remember, Larry Klayman is for everyone.
Let me ask you a question. As we segue out, have you ever reached that point where your blood sugar is so low that you decided you almost peeled that thing open and ate the chocolate inside?
I have no idea what you're referring to.
The piece of gelt you're wearing.
How
close did you come to?
I can never have a clean outro.
I know.
There are no clean outros.
That chocolate's got to be so stale and brittle.
And we'll see if it survives to the next
that
episode.
would kill a dog. Chocolate's deadly for dogs.
And on that, you guys are nuts, but it's the good kind of nuts. Let's end it.
Ciao. Shalom. Auf Wiedersehen.
I think I could cut you off.
Now I have to find.